The morning began with a violent rush of light. Lydia Carmichael flinched as the curtains were yanked open, the sudden brightness slicing through the blurry haze that had become her world. Shapes bled into each other, washed out silhouettes, shifting shadows, nothing truly recognizable. She lifted a trembling hand to shield her eyes, disoriented and startled by the force of it all. Brandon stood by the window, his posture rigid, his breath sharp and irritated. He didn't bother speaking to her at first. Instead, he crossed the room in clipped, impatient strides, jerking open drawers, grabbing clothing, and shoving everything into a duffel bag he'd tossed onto the floor. Lydia could hear the zipper scraping, the drawers slamming, the sound of fabric being handled without care. "Brandon, what are you doing?" Her voice cracked as she tried to focus on the blurred outline that was her husband. "Get up," he snapped. "We don't have time for this." His tone was unlike anything she had heard from him before. Cold, flat, almost businesslike. It made her stomach twist. She pushed herself upright, her fingers curling instinctively around the edge of the mattress for balance. "Please slow down. What's happening?" Brandon exhaled sharply as if her question were an inconvenience. "I'm done, Lydia. I'm done with all of this." He shoved another handful of clothes into the bag. "Your blindness, your appointments, your bills, everything. I'm tired of carrying the weight. I'm tired of being dragged down." The words struck harder than any blow. Lydia felt heat rising in her chest, confusion tangled with fear. "Brandon, please don't talk like that. We can figure something out." "No," he said, spinning toward her. "I already have. You're leaving today." The room tilted. Lydia tried to stand, but her legs buckled under her. Her hands clawed at the nightstand for support, her vision swimming even more than usual. I can't just leave," she whispered. "Where am I supposed to go?" Brandon shrugged, unbothered. "It's not my problem. This house," he pointed toward the floor as if reminding her, "is legally mine. You're not on the deed, and you never have been. You have no right to stay here." His voice was merciless, final. Lydia felt her throat tighten. Through the smeared shapes and shifting light, she could barely distinguish his face, but the tone alone was enough to tell her there was no warmth left, no hesitation, no trace of the man she once trusted. In that moment, the truth settled over her with devastating clarity. Brandon wasn't just angry. He wasn't overwhelmed. He wasn't confused. He was discarding her coldly, efficiently, like something broken he no longer wanted. Lydia clung to the edge of the bed, her breath trembling as she tried to steady herself. "Brandon, please," she whispered. "Where am I supposed to go? I can't just walk out of here. I can barely see." Her voice cracked under the weight of panic, but Brandon didn't soften. Instead, he let out a low, mocking laugh, one that sliced far deeper than the harsh morning light ever could. "Oh, don't worry about that," he said, slinging the duffel bag over his shoulder before dropping it back onto the floor. "I already arranged something for you." The casual tone froze her. Arranged? What does that mean? Brandon crossed his arms, almost proud of himself. "Someone's coming to take you. He'll handle what I owe. The debts, the pressure, everything." He shrugged, as if discussing the sale of an old piece of furniture. "In exchange, he gets you." Lydia felt her chest tighten, so suddenly her breath caught. "Brandon, that's—" She shook her head, forcing the words out. "That's not even legal. You can't just hand me off to some stranger. I'm your wife." He waved off her panic like it bored him. "Oh, stop with the drama, Lydia. Think of it as doing both of us a favor. You'll have a roof over your head. I'll finally stop drowning in your medical bills. Everybody wins." "Everybody," her voice broke. "You're talking about me like I'm property." Brandon didn't deny it. He didn't even seem to hear it. He simply grabbed her wrist, pulled her to her feet, and tugged her toward the hallway. Lydia stumbled, the world tilting, her vision nothing but smudged streaks of color and light. "Brandon, stop! Please stop!" she cried. But he didn't. He steered her straight toward the front door, yanked it open, and pushed her over the threshold. The sudden cool air hit her skin a second before the heavy thud of her duffel bag landing at her feet. Lydia reached out, disoriented, trying to grab hold of anything familiar, but there was nothing. Behind her, the door slammed. A lock clicked into place. Silence followed, thick and absolute. Lydia lifted a shaky hand to the door, her fingers brushing against the wood she could no longer enter. "Brandon, please!" Her voice barely rose above a whisper. No answer. No footsteps. No sign he cared at all. And in that crushing stillness, the truth hit her with full force. She wasn't just abandoned. She was utterly alone and completely powerless. Lydia stood frozen on the porch, her hand still trembling against the locked door, when she heard steady footsteps approaching. She turned toward the sound, though all she could make out was a dark, blurred figure growing closer. "Mrs. Carmichael," a firm but controlled voice asked. "I'm Mr. Collins. I was instructed to take you to my employer." Her pulse jumped. No, I'm not going anywhere with you," she insisted, taking a shaky step backward. "I don't know who you are." "I understand," he replied calmly, though his tone left little room for argument. "But I have my orders." She tried to retreat toward the railing, her hands searching for something to hold onto. But Mr. Collins's presence remained steady, immovable. "Please don't make this harder on yourself," he added, still polite, still composed. Lydia shook her head, her voice rising. "This isn't right. You can't just take me. I didn't agree to anything." "Ma'am," he said, softening just enough to sound almost sympathetic, "I'm not here to harm you. I'm here to transport you. That's all." Then, with gentle but unyielding pressure on her elbow, he guided her toward the waiting car. She resisted until her strength faltered. The world swayed, colors blending, outlines smearing. In the chaos of blurred vision and panic, her body finally gave in long enough for him to open the back door and help her inside. The door shut with a heavy click. A second later, she heard the unmistakable sound of child locks engaging. Her heart sank. "Mr." Collins settled into the driver's seat without a word, and the car began to move. The hum of the engine filled the tense silence as the vehicle rolled farther and farther away from the only home she knew. Lydia clutched the edge of the seat, swallowing hard. She tried to track the direction of the turns, the incline of the road, anything that might clue her in, but everything was a blur. All she had were faint impressions. The shift from city pavement to quieter, smoother asphalt, the diminishing roar of traffic, the subtle change in air as they left civilization behind. Minutes stretched, then more. She had no idea how long they'd been driving. Half an hour? An hour? Time melted into dread. Finally, the car slowed. The engine cut off. Mr. Collins stepped out first, then opened her door. A cool breeze drifted toward her, carrying the scent of trees, damp earth, and something old, like polished wood aged by decades. "This way," he said gently. Lydia allowed herself to be guided, her feet touching unfamiliar stone beneath her shoes. She entered a vast interior where echoes lingered and the faint aroma of old timber hung in the air. Before she could steady her breath, Mr. Collins released her arm. Then he was gone, silent footsteps fading down a hallway, leaving her alone in the cavernous space. Disoriented, blind in more ways than one, and gripped by a fear that sank all the way into her bones. Lydia stood motionless in the middle of the vast entry hall, her breathing uneven, her fingers trembling against the smooth air as if trying to read the room by touch alone. Every sound, the faint echo of her own movements, the quiet settling of the house, felt amplified in her fear-clouded senses. Then a voice emerged from somewhere ahead of her. Calm, low, controlled. "Mrs. Carmichael," the man said. his tone almost soothing despite the circumstances. "There is no need to be afraid." Lydia froze. She turned toward the sound, though all she could make out was a tall, blurred silhouette framed by soft, ambient light. "My name is Jonathan Hale," he continued. "You are in my home." Her throat tightened. Why am I here? What is this place?" "You are safe," he replied simply. Too simply. No explanation, no context. Just that steady, unyielding reassurance. His footsteps approached, but he stopped short of touching her. She could feel the presence of someone who carried authority naturally, someone accustomed to being obeyed. Before she could form another question, Jonathan's voice shifted, still calm, but with quiet command beneath it. "Mrs. Whitford," he called out. Soft footsteps echoed from the right side of the hall. A warm, familiar scent, lavender and old books, filled the air before the woman even spoke. "Yes, sir," the housekeeper answered gently. "Please show Mrs. Carmichael to her room." "Yes, sir." Lydia felt a firm but gentle hand touch her elbow. Light, practiced, guiding without force. Mrs. Whitford spoke, softly near her shoulder. "Come with me, dear." They moved through a maze of hallways that twisted and turned, each step adding to Lydia's confusion. The house was quiet, insulated from the world outside. She could hear subtle things, the faint hum of central air, the soft click of doors closing in distant rooms, the cushioned thud of their footsteps on expensive carpeting. Finally, Mrs. Whitford paused and opened a door. Warm light spilled onto Lydia's vision, revealing a bright blur of color and shape. As the housekeeper led her inside, Lydia sensed the room was large, airy, and the furniture well-placed, not cluttered. She could distinguish the soft outline of a bed, a tall window, and the gentle glow of a lamp. "This will be yours," Mrs. Whitford said. Lydia swallowed. "Who is Jonathan Hale? Why did he bring me here?" The housekeeper hesitated. Lydia could hear it, the small catch in her breath, the weight of words unsaid. "Mr. Hale is a generous man," she answered cautiously. "He prefers to explain things in his own way, at his own time." "That's not an answer," Lydia whispered. "I know," Mrs. Whitford replied quietly. "Rest for now. You're safe here." Safe, yet not free. As the door closed, Lydia felt two truths press against each other. She was being sheltered, and she was being held. When the door clicked shut behind Mrs. Whitford, the silence wrapped around Lydia like a heavy blanket. She reached out with trembling hands, grazing the soft edge of the bed, and sank onto it as if her bones could no longer hold her upright. The moment her head touched the pillow, her composure cracked. Tears slipped down her cheeks soundlessly, no sobs, no breathless gasps, only a quiet unraveling. The room smelled faintly of fresh linen and warm light, scents that should have been comforting. Instead, they made her chest tighten. She pressed a palm to her mouth, trying to contain the shaking in her body. But the weight of what had happened, what Brandon had done, settled heavily over her. Her mind drifted backward, unspooling memories she hadn't intended to revisit. Brandon hadn't always been cruel. She remembered the early years, late-night drives to nowhere, shared breakfasts on their tiny apartment balcony, his easy smile when she teased him about his messy hair. He had once touched her as though she were precious. He had once looked at her as if she were the center of his world. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the warmth faded. The long conversations turned short, then rare, then non-existent. When her vision first began to blur, streetlights splitting into halos, words on a page turning to smudges, he held her and said they would figure it out together. She believed him. She wanted to. For a time he meant it. But as her condition worsened, something in him hardened. His patience thinned, his voice sharpened. His smiles turned mechanical and infrequent. Late nights at work became normal. Nights when he didn't come home at all became more common than the nights he did. He claimed it was projects, deadlines, stress, but Lydia had always been able to recognize the truth, even before she could admit it to herself. There had been perfume, sweet, too youthful, too bold for her. It clung to his shirts like a taunt. She remembered standing at the laundry room sink, holding one of his collars to her face, feeling the truth sting harder than any comment he had ever thrown at her. She had blamed herself for being a burden, for losing her sight, for needing him too much. Now, in this unfamiliar room, the full weight of that misplaced guilt crashed into her. He had left her long before he physically cast her out. His betrayal had not begun this morning. It had been unfolding for years in silent, corrosive pieces. Lydia curled onto her side, wrapping her arms around herself, trying to hold together what felt shattered beyond repair. The deepest sense of loss pressed against her ribs, sharp and suffocating. She had been discarded, not suddenly, but slowly, painfully, humiliatingly, as evening settled over the estate. The soft knock on Lydia's door signaled that it was time. Mrs. Whitford entered quietly, her footsteps gentle on the carpeted floor. "Dinner will be served soon," she said, her tone warm but efficient. "Let's freshen you up a bit." She helped Lydia stand, guided her to the adjoining washroom, and assisted her in smoothing her hair, adjusting her clothing, and steadying her trembling hands. The ritual felt strangely intimate, almost maternal, but it did little to calm the unease spiraling in Lydia's chest. When they stepped into the hallway, the quiet hum of the house seemed louder than before. Lydia listened to the steady rhythm of Mrs. Whitford's pace, relying on it to keep herself grounded as they moved through the winding corridors. The dining room was spacious, filled with soft lighting and the faint aroma of herbs and roasted vegetables. Lydia sensed the presence of someone already seated. She felt the warmth of attention on her before she even heard his voice. "Good evening, Mrs. Carmichael," Jonathan said gently. "Please sit." She was guided into a chair, the cool metal of the utensils brushing her fingers. Her heart thudded with unease as Jonathan continued, his voice calm but unwavering. "I imagine you have many questions," he said. Lydia swallowed hard. "Why am I here? How do you know Brandon? What is all this?" Jonathan exhaled slowly, as though choosing his words with precision. "Your husband has a reputation, not a flattering one. In the company where he works, where I also serve as a director, his behavior has been a concern for some time." Lydia stiffened. "What do you mean?" "He is reckless," Jonathan replied, "unethical, and when faced with debt or consequences, he doesn't hesitate to involve others in his problems, including you." Her breath caught. He couldn't. Jonathan's tone deepened, steady and unyielding. "If I hadn't intervened, he would have handed you over to men far less concerned with your well-being, men who would not have treated you with even basic decency." He paused. "You were?" A bargaining chip to him. The word struck Lydia like a blow. Her hands tightened around the edge of the table. "That's illegal," she whispered. "All of this is illegal. I could call the police." "You could," Jonathan said evenly, "but they would ask where you live, who supports you, who'll care for you until your vision is restored. They will ask for details, proof, resources, and right now you have none of those." Lydia felt the room tilt, her body suddenly weightless. She knew he was right. She had no family who could take her in, no income, no home, not even the ability to walk alone through a grocery store without stumbling. Jonathan continued gently, "I'm not your jailer, Lydia, but I am the only person standing between you and a very dangerous world your husband nearly delivered you to." Emotion gathered in her throat like a rising tide. Brandon hadn't simply abandoned her. He had erased her completely. The dining room had grown very still, as though the walls themselves were waiting for what would come next. Lydia sat rigidly in her chair, her fingers twisting together in her lap, her breath shallow. Jonathan's tone shifted, calm, deliberate, but unmistakably serious. "There are two paths ahead of you, Lydia," he began, "and I want you to understand them clearly." She tensed, bracing herself. "The first," he continued, "is to leave here and try living with your mother." Her pulse quickened. "My mother is nearly 80, she murmured. "She barely manages on her own." Jonathan nodded. "Yes, and she shares that small apartment with your sister, her husband, and their little boy." Lydia's breath caught in her throat. He knew everything. How do you know all that?" she whispered, fear threading through her voice. "I make it my business to know whether someone in my care has alternatives," he replied evenly. "Your family loves you, I'm sure, but your arrival would complicate their already strained living situation. And you know that." Lydia closed her eyes, letting the truth settle over her like a cold, damp shadow. The cramped apartment, the tension, the arguments. She could already hear her brother-in-law's weary sighs, see her sister's tight smile, feel the suffocating discomfort of being an unwanted burden. Jonathan continued, his voice gentler now. "The second option is to stay here, in this house, under my protection. I will ensure your safety and provide whatever you need until your eyesight is restored." Lydia's throat tightened. The words sounded kind, too kind, but they also carried a weight that frightened her. "You're saying I don't have a choice," she muttered. "That's not what I said." His tone remained level, almost soothing. "You are not a prisoner here, Lydia. The doors are unlocked. You are free to walk out whenever you choose." She felt the truth in his voice, but something inside her twisted all the same. She had never felt so powerless, so exposed. Staying meant trusting a man she had never met until yesterday, one who seemed to know more about her life than she was comfortable admitting. Leaving meant returning to a world that had shut its doors on her. Jonathan spoke again, quieter than before. "I won't force you into anything, but I need you to make a decision based on what will truly keep you safe." Lydia's fingers curled against her knees. Her heart thudded painfully. Two choices, both humiliating, both terrifying. She could go back to a family that had no space for her, or remain with a stranger who might be her only lifeline. The next morning unfolded with a quiet softness Lydia hadn't felt in years. Mrs. Whitford guided her outside to the garden, where the air carried the scent of late summer flowers and the delicate rustle of leaves. The estate grounds were peaceful, no traffic, no shouting neighbors, no reminders of the life she had just lost. She sat on a cushioned chair beneath the shade of a tall oak tree. Birds chirped somewhere high above, their songs weaving through the breeze. For hours she let herself breathe, let her shoulders drop, let the tightness in her chest loosen. The stillness felt foreign but healing. For the first time since Brandon had shoved her out the door, Lydia felt her mind stop racing. But by evening, as Mrs. Whitford led her back inside, questions that had lingered all night and all day finally rose to the surface. When dinner was served, Lydia listened to Jonathan take his seat across from her. She could sense his calm presence, steady, composed, waiting. She didn't wait long. "How do you know so much about me and my family?" she asked, her voice trembling but firm. "How do you know Brandon? Why are you involved in any of this?" Jonathan didn't respond immediately. She heard the faint clink of silverware being placed aside, the slight shift of fabric as he leaned in. "I suppose you deserve the truth," he said at last. A pause. "We work in the same corporation. Brandon reports to me." Lydia stiffened. Her mind scrambled through blurry memories. Brandon mentioning late meetings, corporate dinners, strict supervisors she had never met. Jonathan continued. "A few months ago, I walked into one of the offices and found him in a compromising position with an employee. He wasn't exactly discreet about it. His tone was calm, factual, not judgmental, simply honest. From there, it became clear he was struggling both financially and personally. Eventually, I learned he had a wife with a serious vision condition, and that he wasn't handling it well. Lydia's stomach twisted. She could hear the truth in his voice, but hearing it spoken aloud made her skin prickle. "So you just stepped in," she whispered. "Why?" The silence stretched just long enough for her pulse to quicken. Then Jonathan spoke, his voice lower, steadier. "Because I knew what would happen if I didn't. Brandon was desperate. He was careless. He would have handed you over to people who see humans as assets, not lives. I couldn't let that happen." Lydia swallowed hard. "But why go this far? Why bring me here?" Finally, he revealed the part she hadn't dared imagine. "I want to restore your eyesight," he said gently. "I've already arranged for the surgery with one of the best specialists in the state. I will cover everything. Every dollar." Her breath caught. For a moment, the entire world stood still, sound, scent, even the air itself. She couldn't speak. She could barely breathe. Jonathan Hale, a stranger until recently, was offering something her own husband had refused her, a future with light. Lydia felt her heart tremble under the weight of such impossible generosity. The next morning came early. Lydia waited near the front entrance, her nerves tight, her hands folded in front of her, while Mr. Collins prepared the car. When Jonathan arrived, his presence steadied the air around her. "Ready?" he asked gently. She wasn't. Not really, but she nodded anyway. Mr. Collins guided her into the back seat, buckling her safely before taking the wheel. Jonathan settled beside her, and the car glided down the long, quiet driveway. The ride was smooth, almost eerily silent. Lydia listened to the faint hum of the engine, the subtle shifts in speed, the occasional turn. Hours seemed to pass before the car finally slowed. "We're here," Jonathan said. The air smelled sterile, almost floral, a far cry from the harsh, disinfectant odors of public hospitals. Lydia immediately sensed the difference. This was a private, elite clinic, one of those places she had only heard about on the news or glimpsed in glossy brochures she could no longer read. Inside, soft-voiced staff moved efficiently around her. Machines beeped gently in the background. Doctors spoke clearly and respectfully, explaining the evaluation process. "Keratoconus," the specialist said, his tone professional. "Advanced stage. You'll need a corneal transplant, but your prognosis is good." Lydia nodded, overwhelmed yet hopeful. The surgery happened quickly, a blur of preparation. Cold instruments, and the blinding glare of overhead lights. She heard soft beeps, felt pressure around her face, and drifted between awareness and darkness until everything faded into black behind the thick bandages. Time lost meaning after that. Mr. Collins took her back to the estate, helping her navigate the halls. The days blended together. She rested. She listened to the rustle of curtains. She felt the warmth of sunlight on her cheeks. Every so often, Jonathan would knock lightly and step inside, speaking in that same calm voice. "The doctors are pleased," he told her one evening. Everything went as planned. She exhaled, relieved but anxious too. How much did all of this cost? Jonathan paused, as though debating whether the truth would burden her. But honesty won. "About 135,000, he said matter-of-factly. "But it's taken care of. You don't need to worry about that." The number struck her like a physical impact. $135,000. For her. For a woman her own husband had thrown out like trash. Tears slipped from beneath the bandages, dampening the gauze. She didn't bother to hide them. Early one morning, the nurse returned with careful, clinical precision. "It's time." Lydia held her breath as the bandages loosened. Light seeped through the cracks. Then, suddenly, the world bloomed. Color, brightness, edges, clarity. She blinked rapidly, overwhelmed by the flood of detail. A face leaned into view, soft, warm, lined with kindness. Mrs. Whitford. "Oh, sweetheart," the housekeeper whispered, her own eyes wet. "Look at you." Lydia covered her mouth with both hands as emotion surged up and overflowed. She began to weep, freely, openly, unrestrained. Light had returned, and with it a piece of her soul she thought she had lost forever. The world was new again. That was the only way Lydia could describe the morning she stepped into the hallway with her restored sight. Colors felt brighter, richer, the texture of the walls, the gleam of polished wood, the soft patterns woven into the rugs. She drank it all in like someone starved. Mrs. Whitford watched her with quiet pride as Lydia wandered from room to room, marveling at each detail. She traced the elegant lines of the staircase, admired the tasteful art along the walls, and breathed in the fragrant garden air when she stepped outside. For the first time, she saw the estate rather than just sensed it. Hours slipped by before she reached the front window overlooking the driveway. The sun was beginning to dip, casting warm gold across the gravel path. A car approached. Her breath caught. Jonathan stepped out, dressed in a crisp shirt and tailored slacks, his movements unhurried. Confident, he closed the door, adjusted the cuff of his sleeve, and glanced toward the house with a warm, expectant expression, as though he had been thinking about her the entire drive home. Something about the way he stood, the slight tilt of his head, the measured calm in his posture, stirred something faint and familiar in the back of her mind. Then he did it. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a pair of glasses, and adjusted them with a tiny, almost shy gesture, one finger nudging the bridge upward. A quick clearing of his throat, a soft blink. Lydia's heart lurched. That gesture, that awkward sweetness, that boyish habit. Her hand rose to her mouth as realization broke over her like a wave. It's him. It's really him. When Jonathan entered the foyer moments later, Lydia stood waiting for him, her eyes wide, not with confusion this time, but with recognition. He paused when he saw her, a flicker of uncertainty passing through his expression. "Lydia, are you feeling all right?" She stepped closer, her voice trembling. "Your glasses, the way you do that. Jonathan, were you?" She swallowed. "Did we go to Crestwood Middle School?" His breath caught. For a moment he didn't move, didn't speak. Then a gentle, almost bashful smile touched his lips. "I was hoping you'd remember eventually," he said quietly. "Yes, I was that quiet kid in the back row, the one who always volunteered to help you with your science notes, the one who thought you were the brightest, most dazzling girl he'd ever met." Lydia's eyes stung with emotion. The years fell away, and for a heartbeat, she saw not the powerful corporate director in front of her, but the boy who had once adored her without ever expecting anything in return. "You never said anything," she whispered. Jonathan shook his head softly. "I didn't need to. Caring for you was enough then, and it still is." Warmth bloomed in her chest. Unexpected, overwhelming, impossibly tender. A revelation. A beginning. The night of the company's 25th anniversary gala arrived with an air of polished grandeur. Lydia stood before the mirror in her room, her breath catching as she took in her reflection, an indigo gown falling in a soft, elegant cascade, her newly healed eyes bright with clarity. Mrs. Whitford adjusted the final fold of fabric at her waist and smiled with quiet satisfaction. "You look radiant, dear." When Jonathan came to escort her, he paused in the doorway, visibly taken aback. For a moment, the confident executive seemed to forget his composure. "Lydia, you look extraordinary," he said softly. At the venue, a grand hotel ballroom in downtown Richmond, guests in shimmering attire filled the space with laughter and music. But when Lydia stepped inside on Jonathan's arm, the room seemed to hush. Heads turned. Conversations faltered. A few people even stared openly, struck by her transformation. Lydia held her chin steady, reminding herself she belonged here, not as someone's burden, but as someone reborn. Then she saw him, Brandon, across the room. Mid-conversation with a woman Lydia vaguely recognized from company functions, he froze. His expression shifted from confusion to shock to something uglier. His gaze swept over her, her gown, her posture, her sight, struggling to reconcile the woman he had thrown away with the woman standing before him now. He pushed past a group of colleagues and approached her, plastering on a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Lydia," he said, voice dripping feigned warmth. "Wow, look at you. This is something." Jonathan stiffened beside her, but Lydia remained calm. Brandon stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Why didn't you tell me you were getting better? We should talk. Come home with me, all right? We can fix things." Lydia inhaled slowly, feeling years of pain crystallize into one sharp, unwavering truth. "I'm not going anywhere with you," she said firmly. "I'm divorcing you." The false smile evaporated. "Don't be ridiculous. You're my wife." He grabbed her arm, fingers digging into her skin with an entitlement that made her stomach twist. "You're coming with me. Now." Before Lydia could react, Jonathan was there between them, his presence forming a protective barrier. His voice was low and controlled, but the steel in it was unmistakable. "Let go of her." Brandon scoffed. "Stay out of it, Hale. This is between me and my—" Jonathan cut him off, louder this time, enough for nearby guests to turn their heads. "Lydia is not your property, and you will remove your hand from her immediately." Brandon hesitated, then released her with a shove. "You think you can talk to me like that? I work for you, not the other way around." Jonathan straightened, his voice carrying across the room. "Not anymore. As of this moment, you are terminated from the company." Gasps rippled through the crowd. "For unethical conduct," Jonathan continued, "for violating workplace policies, and for displaying aggressive, violent behavior at a corporate event." Security, alerted by the commotion, stepped in. 2 guards took Brandon by the arms as he sputtered threats and protests. "You can't do this. I'll sue. She's my wife," but the words fell flat. People shook their heads. Some whispered. Others looked away in disgust. Lydia watched him being escorted out, feeling the last remnants of fear dissolve inside her. For the first time in years, she felt justice, closure, freedom. Jonathan turned back to her, his expression softening. "Are you all right?" Lydia nodded, exhaling a breath that felt like a lifetime finally released. "Yes," she said quietly. "For the first time, I really am." The night air at the estate was cool and quiet when Jonathan and Lydia returned from the gala. The house seemed to glow softly, as though welcoming her back. Jonathan didn't lead her toward the dining room or the staircase. Instead, he guided her into the grand living room where a fire was already crackling, its amber light flickering across the walls. "Come here," he said gently. Lydia followed him to the hearth, her heartbeat steady but expectant. The warmth of the fire brushed against her skin just as Jonathan turned to face her fully. For a moment, he simply looked at her, really looked, like someone committing a miracle to memory. Then he dropped to one knee. A soft gasp escaped her lips. Jonathan opened a small velvet box, the interior illuminated by the fire's glow. Inside rested a delicate ring, a brilliant stone catching the light in tiny starbursts. "Lydia," he said, voice deep but tender, "you deserve a life filled with safety, dignity, and love. If you'll let me, I'd like to spend the rest of my life giving you exactly that. A breath. Will you marry me?" Tears blurred Lydia's vision, not from blindness this time, but from a joy so sharp it felt unreal. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, steadier. "Yes, Jonathan, I will." He rose, slipped the ring onto her finger, and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. Lydia leaned into him, feeling the final remnants of her old life crumble away. They married soon after in a quiet ceremony on the estate grounds. Sunlight filtered through the trees as they exchanged vows. Simple, heartfelt promises spoken before a small circle of trusted friends and staff who had become like family. In the years that followed, their home filled with warmth, laughter, and eventually the bright voices of their children playing in the garden. With her restored sight and newfound confidence, Lydia poured her heart into a new mission. She founded a charitable organization dedicated to supporting individuals with visual impairments. Using Jonathan's resources and her own experience, she built a network of clinics, support centers, and assistance programs across several states. People who had once stood where she stood, scared, overlooked, abandoned, found help, dignity, and hope through her work. And many of them, grateful and inspired, returned as volunteers. Her foundation grew, but so did the sense of community it fostered. Lydia became known not just as a survivor, but as a guiding light for others navigating the darkness she once endured. Brandon's path, meanwhile, took a very different turn. Unable to maintain steady work after his termination, he sank deeper into debt. Desperation drove him into get-rich-quick schemes and shady partnerships. His gambling worsened. His lies caught up with him. Within a few short years, he was arrested for financial fraud and embezzlement, crimes committed in the frantic effort to claw back the lifestyle he believed he deserved. He served time in state prison. Quietly forgotten by the world he had tried so hard to impress, Lydia never sought revenge. Life delivered it on its own. And in the quiet moments, watching her children run through the rose garden, hearing Jonathan laugh from across the room, seeing the faces of people whose lives she'd touched, Lydia felt something she once thought impossible: peace, healing, a future reclaimed.